this evening, so it's time to start our meeting. Okay, we'll start off with the roll call. What everybody's here, with the exception of George. Ma'am, are you the one for the city? Are you taking notes? Or I have no idea who you are. So.
My name is Renee Wilson. I am Councilwoman.
Okay, all right, thank you. So anyway, well, George is not amongst us this evening, so in front of you, you have the minutes from the last meeting. We need a motion to accept those minutes, or if there's any changes or anything, please bring that up.
I don't have the minutes. I haven't seen that. What are we looking at?
Well, they came in the package. It was just a one page. Take a minute to review those.
Yes, please.
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes.
Need a second?
I'll second.
Very good. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Okay. Our presentation this morning, or this evening, is done by the PDS, and if you'd like to go ahead and present that.
Sure. Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Before I begin my presentation, I just want to take care of a few formalities for the record. So first of all, I just want to confirm that this issue was advertised properly per KRS 100. The next thing I'd like to do is ask the board member if anybody has any conflicts of interest regarding this issue. Okay.
None.
And then finally, ask the board members if anybody's conducted a site visit. All right. Great, thank you very much. So for the record, my name is Andy Vodakovich. I am with staff. I would like to submit the staff report presentation and submitted materials for the record.
Very good, thank you. That's accepted into the record.
So the request this evening is, there's actually 3 requests. And I'm flipping my slides, but not these up here. Okay. There's actually 3 requests this evening, all related to signage for a new business locating at the intersection of Donaldson Highway and Houston Road. The first is going to be an appeal for the number of wall signs permitted. The second request is going to be a variance to increase the height and size of a detached sign, as well as reducing the setback. I do want to note at this point that that's the way that issue was advertised, but after it was legally advertised and notices were sent out, staff received information indicating that the height and size variances were no longer required for that sign. So your action on the height and size of that sign is not necessary tonight, but we will still be reviewing the setback for that sign. And I'll explain that in a little bit more detail as we move forward. And then the final request is a variance request to reduce the setback for a different sign at a different location on the site. So this is the site in question. It is an area of approximately 4 acres. Like I said, it's located on the northeast corner of Donaldson Highway and Houston Road. The site itself has 4 frontages, so there's obviously a frontage along Donaldson Highway and Houston Road. Rodeo Drive is a private street, but it still counts as a frontage, and then Cherry Tree Lane to the rear of the site. So, like I mentioned, there was a little bit of history and some additional information submitted which warrants at least a portion of this request not necessary. So in 2012, there was a variance granted by the Board of Adjustments for this sign that you see on the screen. And if you're familiar with that intersection, you're probably very familiar with that sign. This sign was 60 feet tall, and it was 760 square feet. Just recently, within the last couple of years, this sign was moved to the adjacent site that you see located on the screen there. However, since the board back in 2012 approved variances for the height and size of the sign, and because what is being proposed today still falls within that original size, it's not going to be any bigger or any taller, that the original approval for this sign, the height and the size goes with the land and therefore is no longer necessary or is not necessary for what the applicant's proposing this evening. The site is zoned highway commercial, as well as areas to the northeast, east, and south and west. To the north of the site is zoned residential. And reflective of the zoning, the surrounding land uses are commercial and office to the south and east and west, and single family to the north. The site itself is currently vacant, although it is currently under development. This is a bird's eye of the site, just again offering a different perspective. This was taken in 2023, so fairly recently, and you can see that the site at this point in time was already being cleared and graded for the proposed development. So this is the submitted development plan that the applicant submitted. So we're going to be talking about the signs, but I think a little overview of what's being proposed here is necessary because it will become relevant in our discussion. So the applicant is proposing a 7,000 square foot building to be used as an automotive and truck rental and sales use. There will also be a separate building located to the rear of the property towards Cherry Tree Lane that will be a car wash. Then you see, of course, the associated off-street parking and landscaping. So the applicant submitted a comprehensive sign package. I won't be going through all of the signs because many of the signs meet the requirements and aren't subject to the request tonight. But I do want to focus on the signs that will be at issue tonight, and that's going to be the freestanding sign located here. Also, if you haven't noticed, we kind of rotated 90 degrees. So Houston Road is going vertically on the left-hand side of the screen. This is Rodeo at the bottom, and then Cherry Tree Lane, and then Donaldson is off the top of the screen. So this is the sign at the intersection of Houston Road and Donaldson Highway. There's another freestanding sign located at Rodeo Drive and Houston Road, and then the wall signs that will be on the main building there. And this is a summary of what's being requested, and I'll go again into a little bit more detail, but basically the areas that are outlined in red here are the areas of the regulations that the applicant is asking for relief from. So both of the detached signs, the applicant is asking for a 0-foot setback where a 5-foot setback is what's required. And then regarding the wall signs, the applicant is requesting an appeal for allowing more wall signs than what's permitted. So the first request is going to be the appeal on the number of permitted wall signs. So again, back to the development plan, the applicant is proposing 6 wall signs, and I've highlighted them here in red on the screen. So you've got a wall sign facing Rodeo, you got 1, 2, 3, 4 wall signs facing Rodeo, a single wall sign facing Donaldson Highway, and then a single wall sign facing Cherry Tree Lane. The applicant did submit building elevations as well. So this is the building elevation facing Rodeo Drive. So again, 1, 2, 3, 4 signs. The next slide is going to be a little bit of a different view of the canopy area located at the end of the building. So I put 3 and 4 in parentheses because those are the same signs that we were looking at before. There will be another sign located facing Cherry Tree Lane at the rear of the building. And then finally facing Donaldson Highway, there will be another wall sign. Aside from the number of wall signs, these signs meet all of the requirements of the zoning ordinance regarding the size and location. So on screen is the language out of the zoning ordinance, and highlighted there is the language that states that there is 1 wall sign allowed per building street frontage. As stated earlier, the site does have 4 frontages: Donaldson Highway, Houston Road, Cherry Tree Lane, and Rodeo Drive. Therefore, the site is allowed to have 4 wall signs. I'll walk through a few photographs of the site real quickly. So this is looking at the site from Rodeo Drive, looking roughly southwest at the building that's under construction. This is about 2/3 of the building. What you don't see here behind the location map is the canopy structure that will be part of the building as well. This is from roughly the same location, but now looking almost due west. This will be the car wash structure. This is Rodeo Drive in the foreground and Cherry Tree Lane towards the background of the slide. This is looking from Cherry Tree Lane again. So this is the car wash structure with the main building located towards Houston Road. And then this is looking into the site from Donaldson Highway. So again, you see the building that's under construction. So because of this is an appeal, there's obviously a disagreement from what the zoning administrator interprets the zoning code as saying versus what the applicant is interpreting the code as saying. So I want to go through that for you, just so you have some background, and of course the applicant will be able to also explain the reasons for the request. So in the applicant's submittal, they submitted a submittal letter. They said that the first thing that they were saying is that the signs that are on the canopy there are not considered signs per that section 11.03 I3, pointing out that it states that in such districts, directional information and logos installed on drive-throughs and clearance bars are permitted and not considered signs, and therefore the signs on the canopy really technically aren't considered signs. So again, this is specifically regarding the signs on the canopy. We're talking about the sign facing Rodeo Drive here, and then the sign facing Cherry Tree Lane. And in fact, what the applicant points out is true. What the zoning ordinance says, that in districts where drive-throughs are allowed, drive-through signs or other instructional information devices are permitted, not less than 12 feet in size. These signs shall include no commercial message, but shall simply identify the device as menu directional information or something similar, or a logo that is no larger than 1 square foot in any dimension. Directional information and logos installed on drive-throughs and canopies and clearance bars are also permitted and not considered signs. So that's the verbatim text from the zoning ordinance. And based on that text, the zoning administrator determined that those signs that are on the canopy actually do count as wall signs and therefore count towards the total number of signs that are permitted on the site. The reason for the determination is that the structure, that canopy, does not meet the definition of a drive-through from the zoning ordinance perspective. The zoning ordinance actually specifically defines a drive-through as the component of some motor vehicle-oriented business which provides retail or services to patrons while they remain in their vehicles rather than the patrons entering the business. As you saw from the renderings, and if you're familiar with rental businesses, the purpose of that canopy is to, of course, provide some cover for folks returning their cars, which by their very nature are folks pulling up, getting out of their cars, and either leaving the keys with an attendant or actually going into the building and dropping off the keys. So again, not considered a drive-through for the purposes of the zoning ordinance. Also, and you'll see that from the renderings, the signs contain more than directional information and logos. They contain a commercial message. And finally, they exceed the maximum size for those signs. The zoning ordinance does allow for some signage on canopies, but less than 12 square feet in area. So the second part of the applicant's letter states that the development will contain 2 separate buildings. The car wash is entitled to 4 signs, and the main building is also entitled to 4 signs. Since there are no signs being proposed on the car wash, those signs basically should be allowed or transferred over to the main building. And again, the zoning administrator's determination or interpretation of this is that, first of all, again, yes, separate structures on the same lot within that zone are entitled each to their own wall signs. The zoning ordinance does not allow for the sum total of all wall signs permitted on a site to be placed on a single building, though. So you can have 4 signs on this building and 4 signs on that building. You don't have to have 4 signs on that building, but that doesn't necessarily mean then you get 8 signs over here on this building or whatever the case may be. The next component of the applicant's submittal, they're stating that there will be 3 distinct and separate businesses, all under the Enterprise banner, to be located within one building. There'll be the Enterprise Rent-A-Car, the Enterprise Car Sales, and the Enterprise Truck Rental. And the applicant states, again, referring to the table in the ordinance, that 1 additional wall sign is permitted per public entrance. Enterprise's primary building on the site will have 3 distinct and separate public entrances for each of the 3 distinct and separate businesses that will operate in this building: car rental, car sales, and truck rental. So again, the code does in fact say that within the highway commercial zone, 1 additional wall sign is allowed per public entrance. The maximum size of that sign can be 6 square feet. And under additional regulations, these additional wall signs are for buildings with 3 or more tenants sharing a common entrance and allowed at the public entrance and not legible from the public right-of-way. Oh, excuse me. So the zoning administrator's interpretation regarding this is that the building itself was designed for, basically designed for a single tenant, that there are common entrances where a customer or an employee could enter, there are common restrooms, and there's a continuous flow through the building. So when it comes to signage, yes, like when you have a strip center and you've got each individual business, each one of those individual businesses is allowed to have a wall sign, but again, within a strip center, there's typically no connecting. They each have their own standalone facilities, whatever that might be, and that's just simply not the case according to the zoning administrator's interpretation of what was submitted here. So to summarize all that, the zoning administrators determined that the proposed wall signs do not fall under that additional wall sign classification. The applicant, first of all, states that the businesses will have distinct and separate entrances. However, one of the requirements for these signs is that there's a shared common entrance. Just by the fact that the applicant stating there will be a separate entrance, that contradicts what the zoning ordinance states. Also, the maximum size for those additional wall signs is only 6 square feet. As you saw from the elevations, the proposed signs are much larger than the maximum area allowed for what is intended for those wall signs. So the zoning ordinance states that the board, per KRS 100, has the ability to hear and decide appeals where it's alleged that there is an error in any order, decision, or authorization by the zoning administrator. Also, just want to point this out, this is from state law, that it basically directs or requires the zoning administrator to use the literal terms of the zoning regulations. When the zoning administrator is looking at this, it's irrespective of special circumstances or things that might be a little bit out of the ordinary for a specific lot. Literal interpretation of the zoning regulations. So staff's recommendation is to uphold the zoning administrator's decision. The zoning administrator's decision was based on the literal terms of the zoning ordinance. The uses within the HC zone are permitted to have 1 wall sign per street frontage. The site has 4 street frontages, and therefore the building can have 4 wall signs. The signs on the canopy are considered wall signs and therefore counted towards the total number of signs allowed on the site. Putting the sum total of all signs permitted on the site on a single structure is a circumvention of the zoning ordinance. And finally, the building was designed as a single tenant space. So I know that was a lot to digest for just the first request, and I do want to go through all of these requests before we hear from the applicant, but I will pause and just ask if you have any questions regarding this, because if you have any questions now, I'd rather answer them. If we get to the end of the presentation, it might be that you forget what you were going to ask, something like that nature. So any questions regarding this?
Do we have any questions on this?
Okay, well then moving on. The second request, so as I stated earlier, was advertised as a variance to increase the height and size as well as reduce the setback of a detached sign. But as I mentioned, based on information that we received after we advertised it, the variances for the height and size are no longer necessary, that the board back in 2012 granted variances for that. Those run with the land, and therefore it's not necessary in this case to reconsider those variances. However, we still are going to be looking at reducing the setback from 5 feet to 0 feet. So the first sign, again, that we're talking about is at the corner of Houston Road and Downton Highway. This is a rendering of the sign that the applicant has provided. This is looking almost due north from the intersection of Downton Highway and Houston Road. The location of the sign is going to be roughly in this location where you see the poles right now. This is looking northwest along Donaldson Highway towards the intersection of Houston Road. So you'll see the signs for the Country Inns and Suites and Waffle House, and then across the street is where the proposed Enterprise sign would be located. And this is just looking a little bit closer, again, from that vantage point right on the intersection there. So the sign will be located roughly in this location here. This is looking northeast from the intersection of Donaldson Highway and Houston Road. So Donaldson Highway is going left to right on the screen, and Houston Road is then going from the foreground to the background. A sign will be on the left-hand side, and again, you can see some of the adjacent businesses adjacent to that intersection. And then this is looking from roughly the corner directly adjacent to the site, looking southeast along Donaldson Highway towards I-71, 75. From the same location, now looking almost directly south across down the intersection there. Again, you've got another auto-oriented use here. I can't quite see the sign for this one because it's located kind of perpendicular, or excuse me, parallel. No, I was right, perpendicular to this. But here's a little bit of a better shot. So this is on the other side of the intersection, again, looking southeast. This is the sign of the business located on the caddy corner to the site, as well as some other signs in the general vicinity. And this is looking in the same general direction, southeast, down Donaldson Highway on the right-hand side of the screen. The site is on the left-hand side of the screen. The proposed detached sign will be located somewhere behind this existing vegetation. So looking at the zoning ordinance does allow one sign per street frontage. Minimum setback from a street is 5 feet. So before the board can grant any variance, the board must find that the variance will not adversely affect the public health, safety, or welfare, will not alter the essential character in the general vicinity, will not cause a hazard or nuisance, and will not allow an unreasonable circumvention of the zoning ordinance. So in making these findings, the board shall consider whether the requested variance arises from special circumstances which do not generally apply to land in the vicinity or within the same zone, that the strict application of the zoning would deprive the applicant of the reasonable use of the land or would create an unnecessary hardship, and that the circumstances are the result of actions the applicant has taken subsequent to the adoption of the zoning ordinance. So staff finds that this requested variance does not arise from special circumstances, which do not generally apply to other properties in the general vicinity or within the same zone. As noted earlier, the surrounding area is zoned highway commercial, and there are no other topography or other circumstances that apply to this land that do not apply to other land in the general vicinity. Staff also finds that the strict application would not deprive the applicant of the reasonable use of their land or create an unnecessary hardship. The applicant can erect a sign that meets the setback requirements. And finally, the staff finds that this application is not the result of actions taken by the applicant. The applicant did identify the need for these variances through the normal permitting process. So staff is giving the variance request to decrease the setback an unfavorable recommendation. The basis for staff's recommendation is that it's an unreasonable circumvention of the zoning ordinance. This is a 100% reduction in the setback requirement. The third request is for a separate sign, but it looks very similar to the one that we just had because it is also, again, a variance to reduce the setback from 5 feet to 0 feet. This is for the sign located at the intersection of Rodeo Drive and Houston Road. This is the rendering that the applicant has provided for that sign. This is looking almost due north along Houston Road towards the location of where this sign will be. And then this is looking northwest across Houston Road at the location of where the sign is. So this is Houston Road, this is Rodeo Drive, and then this is the site that's currently being developed. Again, we're looking at the same regulation as we were with the last one, the last sign. We went through the statutes. I won't go through those again. And we also went through what the board shall consider. Again, I'm not going to go through this again because it's just about verbatim what I stated before for the exact same reasons. And so staff is also giving this an unfavorable recommendation. Again, for the reason that it's an unreasonable circumvention at 100% reduction of the setback. So again, there was a lot there. Staff is recommending unfavorable on all of these requests, but there are 3 requests. So the board, once you hear testimony from everyone here, you can take all 3 of these in one single motion. I would recommend doing them in all separate motions, but it's entirely up to your purview. But again, there's 3 separate requests here. So that concludes my presentation. I will be happy to answer your questions.
Okay, so basically what we're doing, or what we're voting on or this evening, is there's a matter of 6 wall signs are requested where 4 are deemed to be allowed. And we have 2 setback issues of individual signs. That's it?
That's it.
Okay, that's to simplify everything. It's, there's a lot of information out there, and so that's all we have to go through, and we appreciate your presentation.
Sure.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions?
I got a question for you, Andy. The setback is currently 5 feet. Do you have any insight as to why 5 feet? Why wasn't it 2 feet or 12 feet?
Sure. So I don't know the specific reason why it's 5 feet, but in general, the setbacks are there for several reasons, to provide uniformity within the city, also to keep clear sight distances along roadways, and finally, the setbacks are there. So in this particular case for the sign, so one property owner's sign does not necessarily block someone else's sign further down the road. So that's kind of a general answer. The specific answer as to why 5 feet, I don't know, but that is I would say a fairly common setback from street right-of-ways for any type of sign.
Now, on that setback is from the right-of-way line, not actually the back of the curb or anything to that nature. It's actually the right-of-way and then 5 foot, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, do you happen to know what their setback or the right-of-way dimension is offhand?
I don't have that offhand. If you
Okay.
gave me a minute, I could find out for you, though. I could estimate it for you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Oops.
I'll actually go back a couple of slides too, so just a second here. So the right-of-way of Houston Road between, roughly in the area of where Rodeo Drive is 125 feet. So you're talking about a 75-foot half right-of-way. And as you'll see too, it doesn't look like Houston Road is actually centered within that right-of-way, that they do have a little bit more, I guess what I call it, more space on this side where the applicant is. You also see here that at least according to this information, the property juts out a little bit towards Donaldson Road. And in that location, the right-of-way is, didn't like that. Let me see if I can try again. Oops, maybe I gotta clear it. Sorry. Let me do this again. So the right-of-way in this location is about 100 feet. So you're talking about a 50-foot right-of-way there.
Okay.
And then Donaldson Highway, if you're interested in knowing, let me see if I can get that. Again, it's not going to be consistent across the entire property, but directly adjacent where you see it jutting out there is about 125 feet as well.
So those dimensions are for the center line?
No, that's the entire right-of-way width, so the center line would be half that.
Okay, half, so 50 from the center line, road center line.
Right.
Okay. All right, very good.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Now, anyone who's going to speak for or against, please stand up and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. Very good. So,
Mr. Chairman, I'm Tom Breitenstein, the attorney for this matter. That's why I wasn't sworn in. You normally don't swear in the attorneys.
okay. You were already sworn in as a...
Before the Supreme Court.
Yeah, there you go.
Not before the chairman of the board. Excuse me. Once again, my name is Tom Breitenstein with the law firm of Breitenstein Legal Services of 855 Greenville Avenue, Suite 300, Cincinnati 45246. As I mentioned, I'm the attorney for the applicant and the owner of the property, but I'm more than just the attorney for them. I'm also a planner. They hired me because I wear two hats. Before I get into my further background, for the record, Jennifer Hendrick of Enterprises here. She is the Group Property Development and Facilities Manager for Enterprise. Back to me, if I can, Mr. Chairman. As I mentioned, I am a planner. I have a degree in urban and regional planning from Miami University in Ohio. From 1986 to 1992, I worked as the zoning enforcement officer in Boone County. While I was working as a ZEO, one of my main roles, my main functions besides zoning enforcement was to serve as the staff person for the various boards of adjustment, Boone County, Union, Florence, and Walton. And in that capacity, I presented variance requests and appeal requests before those various boards. In 1992, while still employed there, I became a certified planner by the American Institute of Certified Planners. That's the AIC certification that you see behind Mr. Vidakovich's last name as well. Since passing the bar in 1993 and 1994 in Ohio, I focused my law practice on real estate in general, but zoning and land use law in particular. I'm a member of the the Kentucky chapter of the American Planning Association. I'm also the chairman of the Planning Commission where I live in Glendale, Ohio, I should say, and I'm also the chairman of the Board of Appeals where I live in Glendale, which is akin to the Board of Adjustment here in Kentucky. Before I continue, I do want to thank staff for a very thorough review and for their professionalism throughout our interactions with the staff. They've been very professional in that regard, so I do appreciate that. Let me, how do I get out of this one? Different state.
Yeah. Just go here.
All right. For the record, Mr. Chairman, we had a little bit of a technical glitch as we were preparing my slide presentation. That slide is cut off. Unfortunately, I have a duplicate in my folder. I'd like to submit it to you for your consideration. I submit that primarily, Mr. Chairman, to begin a little bit of the history of the site. That's a survey, an ALTA survey that was commissioned by Enterprise before they bought the property in the middle part of last year. And you can see from the various highlighted property lines, there were 6 separate parcels that now have been combined to one parcel. And I want to highlight the fact that if we had not combined those properties, each one of those parcels, those 6 parcels, would be entitled to its own wall signs, its own freestanding signs. Of course, Enterprise, as I mentioned, has already consolidated that, and you've seen the plat, or at least the current boundaries of the property on the various slides that Mr. Vidakovich had. Continuing, if I can, Mr. Chairman, with a bit of the history. The next few aerial photographs were taken from the GIS system here in Kenton County. 1962, most of you probably don't remember. There's not much there. I think what's ultimately became Peel's Palace was there, a few houses, but nothing else. But please do note the various road frontages that we have. Houston Road, Donaldson Road, all of them had their own driveways, including out to Cherry Tree Lane. I only throw this slide in because it's just to be complete in the record. That was the next slide that was available by way of the GIS system. Obviously, you can't see much there just because of the quality of the photograph. In 1989, we get quite a bit more information. Once again, what eventually became Peel's Palace is in the center of our site. There's a commercial development facing on Cherry Tree Lane. There was a gas station with a canopy at the very corner of Houston and Donaldson. Another commercial structure here. I believe this is either a house or another commercial structure at the very corner. And of course, once again, all the various driveways that were incumbent upon these businesses as they existed back in 1989. Fast forward to 1999, Mr. Chairman, once again you see a more clear image of the site in its development at that stage, and including in particular the gas station with a canopy. I did an open records request, Mr. Chairman, to see what sign permits had been issued, and that's when I found the sign variances that you all had granted 2017 and 2012, I believe, also. But just so you realize, over the course of the history of this property, I found no fewer than 29 separate sign permits for these various properties. Up on Cherry Tree Lane, there was a U-Totem, ultimately a Circle K, a flower shop, a couple of video stores, some hair shops. I mentioned the Peel's Palace. I don't know for a fact, but that may have been a bowling alley at some point. Was that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Eventually it became Peel's Palace, and I think there's a bit of history there as well, long since gone. And of course, at the very corner that we had a Texaco station, a Standard Oil station, Dixie Realty, and JD's Food Market was also located along Donaldson Highway. Once again, everyone had at least their own, had some signs that were issued. And that's why I got that information, because of from the open records request. But you can even see one sign here, I believe to be associated with the gas station. There's another one you'll see in a shadow elsewhere associated with the other properties. But ultimately, my point is, a lot of signs were on this site and could have been on the site if we hadn't consolidated them. As the clock moved forward, Mr. Chairman, the site became a little bit disheveled, to say the least. You see a little bit of the decline of the properties here in 2004. 2007, by then, Peel's Palace had been demolished. I think that's just the foundation that we view here, along with the foundation of the gas station. I believe the commercial development on Cherry Tree Lane is still active at this point, but not very much. 4 cars is what I can count. Continuing, by 2012, everything had been demolished. But it was that year that you saw you all approved the tall sign for the Beacon Center. And in fact, in 2018, you can see that sign here located at the very corner of Houston Road and Donaldson Highway. The shadow gives you an indication of the sheer height of the sign. It was approved at 60 feet and ultimately approved at 760 square feet. You know, one thing too that is I want to point out from this series of slides is the property line along what I call the northern boundary. It essentially splits Rodeo Drive. Enterprise owns half of Rodeo Drive, and there's of course a mutual maintenance agreement with the adjoining property owner to the north. But even though it is functionally a through street from Houston to Cherry Tree Lane, it is a private street nonetheless. But needless to say, as Mr. Vidakovich pointed out, that does give us 4 frontages, which I think is a unique situation that I'll hit upon later. And continuing in 2020, once again, nothing going on shortly before we bought the property, except that the fact that that sign remained. One other thing that we'll see in a subsequent slide is the location of that sign. It's in this current position, it's on the state right-of-way. It is not set back 5 feet into the property line. It's not even on the property line. It's on the right-of-way. But ultimately, that was taken down and moved to its new location at the Beacon Center behind us. And that was just in 2023 in preparation for the final sale and development of our property. One last, I know you're all familiar with that sign. It's still there, at least on a different location. And you can, of course, see the sheer size and height of the sign. You'll see in a subsequent picture, and you've already seen a picture from Mr. Vidakovich, that we're proposing a sign of 309 square feet, so less than half of this size, and certainly less than half of the height. The location we're proposing is not in its location there, but it will essentially be just a touch up the hill right on the property line. This is essentially a document or a survey, I think, of what I've just provided to you, showing the various lots that we have since consolidated. I only show that to give you a close-up of the location of the sign that was moved to the Beacon Center. It was, again, on the state right-of-way, not on private property. At some point, it may have been set back from the property line, but in fact, when we took the property, ownership of the property, it was located on the state right-of-way. The next few slides will get to the meat of the application, Mr. Chairman, but before I do that, I want to sort of set the stage and give you some things to keep in mind during your discussions, during your deliberations. First and foremost, and you may have heard this already, but zoning ordinances are what they say are in derogation of the common law. In other words, they are contrary to the common law right to use your property in any way that you desire. That common law has since been tempered by the zoning as supported by the Supreme Court over the years. But the Kentucky courts have consistently ruled, even in light of zoning, that the zoning ordinances should be liberally construed and administered in favor of the property owner. And that's because, once again, zoning is in derogation of the right to do with your property what you want. Therefore, when you're looking at the zoning code, you really need to look at it closely with an eye bent towards the property owner, in the favor of the property owner. And conversely, restrictions on the use of the property must be strictly construed against the person or the entity seeking to prohibit or restrict a proposed use. One other consideration, Mr. Chairman, is, and you probably know this, if you don't know it by words, you know it instinctively, and that is that your role is to be a safety valve. The board's role is to make zoning workable. So whenever the code is unworkable or unusual or onerous, that's your role, is to be a safety valve in cases under those circumstances. And finally, Mr. Chairman, in your deliberations, I ask you to keep in mind the intent, the stated intent from the zoning code of the HC zoning regulations. And I'll read that. It's a short 2 sentences. The intent of the Highway Commercial District is to recognize the unique aspects of commercial uses commonly found along highway corridors and to promote coordinated quality development in these areas. Uses in this district may range in scale and intensity, but are typically automobile-oriented and seek high visibility. As such, it is important to properly plan circulation and parking areas, signage, landscaping, and other site features. And I submit to you, Mr. Chairman, that what you'll find in the various slides that you've already seen that we will be showing you, Enterprise's uses and Enterprise's design of the site is geared entirely towards satisfying the intent that I just read to you. And we obviously chose a highway corridor to be accessible and to be highly visible to our customers. But in our process, our planning and design process, we were very careful in making sure that there's proper circulation and parking on the site. And a key to that is having a standardized sign package that is designed to not only satisfy the intents of the zoning, but also to facilitate traffic on site, as well as to extend the national branding of Enterprise to this market and to this site. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to go a little bit different direction than Mr. Vikovich. I'm going to start with the variance request and remind you that there are certain findings that the board must find when evaluating a variance. And I submit that these are written in statute, but they are geared toward you as a board exercising your common sense and your judgment in whether or not to grant a variance. And those findings are whether or not the uses the variance will adversely affect the public health, safety, or welfare, whether or not the variances will alter the essential character of the general vicinity, whether the variance will cause a hazard or a nuisance to the public, and whether or not the variance would allow an unreasonable circumvention of the requirements of the zoning regulations. And of course, you've heard from Mr. Vikovich the second part of that statute, the tools that you would use to help you make those findings, special circumstances, whether strict application of the code would deprive the applicant of a reasonable use of the property, or the second part of that is whether it would be an unnecessary hardship. And I want to emphasize the word unnecessary, and you'll see why in a minute. And the last one, of course, doesn't have any application here because that is whether or not the actions that the applicant took gave rise to the request for variance. And I agree with the staff that there's nothing that would be implicated in that particular character standard. Mr. Chairman, I submit to you that these two variances do satisfy the findings, the first thing that I read to you. I want you to apply your common sense and your sound judgment to these reduced setbacks. And in fact, we're asking for 5 feet. Let me show you what 5 feet is. We're asking for a distance of a sign from here to where I'm standing at the podium. I think, again, exercising common sense and your good judgment, you all know, and I think you'll agree with me, that that's not going to affect the public health, safety, or welfare. That distance that I just marked is not going to change the essential character. And I know you're very familiar with this intersection, and you saw photographs from Mr. Vikovich. And that distance will not cause a hazard or a nuisance to the public. And in fact, that minor distance will not allow an unreasonable circumvention of the zoning regulations. In the scheme of things, for this site, 5 feet is negligible. As far as the unique characteristics or special circumstances that apply, I want to give special emphasis to the fact that we have 4 separate road frontages. And that in and of itself is unique. But what's unique and what's special about this circumstance is we are not permitted to use any of those frontages except for the one, the private frontage along Rodeo Drive. We have no driveways on Houston, nothing along Donaldson, and nothing along Cherry Tree Lane either. So again, that drives home the fact of the need for these variances, and that is to get our customers to the site, they'll see the sign, and they'll have on their GPS the address on Rodeo Drive, but it's not going to be obvious to them how to get there without the proper signage that we proposed in this comprehensive sign package. And this is the first sign that we've proposed, the one at the intersection of Houston and Donaldson, and you can see that it's intended to do just that, to mark our site and to give an arrow facing down Houston Road. Now, if that sign were placed 5 feet further back, it would be that less visible, and would also get into the landscape area that we are very proud of. It would either eliminate some of the landscape or would be hidden by some of the landscaping. And again, there's no discernible benefit from moving the sign back 5 feet. Another special consideration, Mr. Chairman, is the very right-of-way widths. I'll get to that in a minute, but here's the other sign that we're asking for the variance of. Again, if you move this sign back 5 additional feet, it will be less visible from Houston Road as you approach Rodeo Drive and would be lost in the landscaping. We could make that sign larger. We have the right to make that sign up to 60 feet and 60 square feet in size, up to 20 feet in height. But we have preferred to keep it small, 16.31 square feet, and was it about 10 feet height, Andy? So again, that goes back to what I said earlier, of keeping a comprehensive and uniform branding package of signs. And the same applies for the first sign that we mentioned, the main sign at the roadway. We could make this sign up to 760 square feet and up to 60 feet tall, based on the variance that this board granted so many years ago. But again, from a branding perspective and for uniformity and for just a clean site, we want to keep it at this size in a more legible location, 5 feet closer to the roadway. You've seen this slide before. Our proposal is to put the sign right on the right-of-way line here at the corner, the first sign. The second sign would be located in this area, again, right on the right-of-way line. And this image, and I'll get to it in a minute, but this also points out the width of the right-of-way here. I mean, this is not only the right-of-way line, but there's also a retaining wall there. So there's a difference in height elevation. If you've driven down there lately, you've seen that the grading of our site, Houston Road goes lower, but our site goes higher as you go, and certainly as you go up Rodeo Drive, that's a higher elevation as well. All going to the special circumstances that are different here. Again, a site plan that shows our signs, the locations of our signs at the corners, right on the right-of-way line. And this goes to one of the questions. I measured it earlier before the meeting. The distance from the right-of-way line to the edge of the pavement, not to the other right-of-way line, but just to the edge of the curve, is 60 feet for the one sign that's at Rodeo Drive and Houston. A little bit smaller just because of this jut from our sign location at the corner of Houston and Donaldson. That's 45 feet from the right-of-way line to the edge of the curb. And likewise, from the edge of the curb of Donaldson to the property line, to the right-of-way line, is 45 feet in this location. And Mr. Chairman, this is from our landscaping plan. So the other reason I chose this plan was to show that if we were to put it behind the landscaping in both locations, the signs would be potentially lost in the landscaping that we're required. And we're very proud of the landscaping. And we don't want to have to remove any landscaping just to get extra visibility of a sign that we can get easily by having 5 feet. We talk about hardship and unnecessary hardship being one of the findings. The flip side of that is whether or not the locations of this sign would give any corresponding benefit to the public. And I can think of no benefit to the public to having signs located 5 feet further away from the right-of-way as we proposed.
Throw a question out.
Sure.
On that. The height of the sign, when you have a pole basically, and then what's the height to the beginning of the sign where it actually expands out to the letter? Do you have that dimension offhand?
I'm not sure if it's labeled on there. Jennifer, do you know by any chance?
I think that particular one is about 25 feet in height.
From the ground level to the sign, the base of the sign, the beginning of it?
To the very top of the sign, right?
The top. No, I'm talking about underneath to where the sign actually starts from the pole. Right there, yep.
We can get that, what that is.
Just,
From the ground to the middle, that we're talking about.
yeah, that's one of the things we consider on right-of-ways and stuff, is if it's going to be an obstructive view of traffic. So if you have the big sign that goes all the way down, then it's somewhat of a problem, so.
And it won't. I think if you, let me go back to the site plans. Yeah, the base of the sign in either location, even here, will be at least 45 feet away from the curb. So there's no way that sign is going to block any traffic visibility up or down the road.
Okay, thanks.
And that's true of both signs, to be honest. And finally, you heard Mr. Vidakovich say that staff is suggesting that the 100% reduction of this setback is, by definition, an unreasonable circumvention. I submit to you, based on the measurements I showed you here on the floor, that that's just not true. It's really an unreasonable and unnecessary burden on enterprise to have that additional setback under these circumstances. That concludes my conversation about the variances, Mr. Chairman. Again, as Mr. Vidakovich did, it might be a good time to have a short break if you have any questions.
Does anyone have any questions about that? Anybody? I think we're all pretty clear there.
All right.
Okay.
Let's move on to the appeal section. Once again, I remind, because it's even more important here, and that is use your common sense when you're interpreting the code. And when you interpret the code, you have to do it in a manner that favors the property owner. And in that vein, I submit to you that the signs that we have presented for the canopy are not, under the code, truly signs. Let me give you the full background, and you've seen these before, so I won't belabor them. Here's the sole wall sign that we are proposing to face Houston Road. And if you get an image here of the bit of the site plan that we had, the building itself, this main building, will be set back quite a distance from Donaldson. So it's really not going to be, that sign is not going to be terribly visible from Donaldson. There's a difference in elevation. It's not a large sign, but instead it's intended to mark and to be a part of our national brand. So that's the one sign that we're talking about on the Donaldson Road front. To the back, what I call the back of the building, is where we are proposing three additional wall signs, one for the car sales, one for the truck rental, and one for rental car. Did you have a question?
No, I was just counting with you.
Very good. Remember that this frontage faces Rodeo Drive, which counts as a road frontage for sign purposes, but it is, strictly speaking, a private road. In fact, as I pointed out, we own half of it. Enterprise owns half of it. So the only people who are going to see these signs are our customers and the people who are coming from the Beacon Center directly next door. What we're talking about is the canopy signs. And there's a better image, and of course you've already seen this, I use the word signs because Mr. Vidakovich uses the word signs. But from a strictly legal perspective, it's our position that those are not classified as signs under section 11.03 I3. And again, you've heard this before, that in the HC district, directional information and logos that are installed on a drive-through canopy are not considered signs. That's a direct quote, or at least a direct paraphrase, cutting out some of the fat of that quote. to demonstrate our position. Those are not signs according to the code. And again, keep in mind, interpreting the code must be done in a way that favors the property owner. Reading that passage, again, begs the question of what is a drive-through? And I'll read the definition as you've already heard. The component of some motor vehicle-oriented businesses which provides retail or services to patrons while they, in other words, the patrons, remain in their vehicles rather than the patrons entering the business. Mr. Chairman, first and foremost, it doesn't say, that passage doesn't say that that's the only way that patrons can use a drive-through. It's just, it leaves open the possibility that the patrons who are using a drive-through or a canopy can exit their vehicles. And in fact, in a minute, I'll turn to Ms. Hendrick to explain in a little bit detail of how that canopy will be used. I'll give it my best stab, and I'll let her take it from there. Certainly, you'll have customers who will come in, patrons who will come in to the store and to the people door, if you will, go to the counter, rent a car, and then they'll go into a car into the canopy to pick up the rental. Other instances will be where Enterprise is that company that you see advertised on TV. They'll come and get you. The Enterprise employee will come with their car to your home or to your place of business, get you in their car, and drive you back to this location. And then the drivers will swap so that the patron never goes into the building and just drives away from the canopy. Other instances are where somebody, a family or friend, will drive through this canopy area, drop off some patron, and then drive through as well without ever exiting the vehicle. So in essence, it's not the same as a drive-through that you see at a McDonald's or a Wendy's, and you really don't expect people to get out of their car there. In this case, you have a combination of both. And Jennifer, I don't know if you want to elaborate on anything, or did I hit everything?
You did pretty well. Yeah, I think, we're, again, like a Chick-fil-A or a company, we're trying to make things fast for our customers. Our technology keeps evolving. So that is, as Tom stated, is to really free up the customer from having to come in and come to the counter. The return cards there, we have tablets, we do a lot of our transactions out there, we need from there. Also, if we have a customer bring it in, they may not have to come to the office. We do have customers that still can come to the office, but it's really that kind of free them up from longer transaction times coming into the office. We give them some shelter as well. So for us, the canopy is a drive-through, depending on whose definition that is, right? It's a drive-through for us, and it frees up our customers and makes their transaction time more quickly.
All right. Thank you. I had good coaching. In any event, I threw a couple of slides in here just to show you that the canopies in the area do have, in this case, they have signs. I'll call them graphics. I mean, because in our case, they aren't classified as signs. This is the Marathon Station at the corner of Cherry Tree and Donaldson, and you're all familiar, and you can see it has signs on the canopy. And directly across the street, across Donaldson, is the Speedway, once again with signage on the canopy and signage on the main building. And I don't think that the world is falling apart because of those various graphics on the canopy. And keep in mind that everything that those last two slides, those are signs that face a public or two public rights of way in this case, whereas ours are facing private property strictly. You saw there's two components of the graphics on the canopy. One is the word returns, and I submit to you that it falls within the characterization of a directional information back to the sign code section that I read to you, that classifies directional information as not signs. The other component of that provision is that logos are allowed on canopies and are not considered signs. And I took this from the trademark office, which shows you that this graphic is a registered trademark. It's a registered logo of Enterprise, and therefore, once again, does not qualify as a sign under the code section that I read to you. And in fact, here's the definition from the the Federal Code of Statutes, the trademark includes any word, name, symbol, or device, or any combination thereof, used by a person and which person has a bona fide intention to use in commerce and applies to register on the principal register. That's the previous slide that I just showed you. And then, of course, that word, name, symbol, device, and so forth is used to identify or distinguish his or her goods, including a unique product from those manufactured or sold by others. So again, Mr. Chairman, I submit to you that what we have on that canopy are directional information and a logo, which are not classified as signs, based on a reasonable interpretation of the code, and the reasonable interpretation of the code must favor us based upon the state of the Kentucky case law that I've cited at the very beginning of my presentation. One other aspect, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to touch upon is, and Mr. Vidakovich did as well, there is a second building on our site, and I'll see if I can find a graphic of that to show you. I'm referring, of course, to the car wash building that we are planning, or that's under construction on, I'll call it the western part of the site. We propose absolutely no signage whatsoever on that building. And instead, if the interpretation I just gave to you is not deemed adequate, it's our position that that building, the car wash building itself, is entitled to 2 signs, maybe even 4 signs, based on the number of frontages that we have. And beyond that, Mr. Vidakovich states that there's allowing those signs from the car wash to be moved to, in our case, the canopy, would not be allowed in the zoning administrator's estimation, as because it would circumvent the intent of the zoning code. I think it's wrong. It's a wrong interpretation. In fact, I say that because Mr. Vidakovich cites no particular section of the zoning code that says those signs can't be borrowed from the car wash to the canopy in our case. Mr. Vidakovich was very careful in citing other cases, other sections of the zoning code to support the position of the zoning administrator. But and there's a glaring deficiency in that particular interpretation. And I say that because there is nothing in the zoning code that says that one can't borrow signs from one building to the next. And I say that once again, Mr. Chairman, in the spirit of what I said at the top of my presentation, that that's an adequate and appropriate and reasonable interpretation of the code, the position that I've just given to you on both arguments. And those interpretations should go to the benefit of the property owner. And again, I hearken back to my plea that you exercise your good judgment and your common sense. What you've seen before you today is not a gross abuse of the sign code. This is a very well thought out professional sign package based on national standards to create a national brand. So if you overrule the zoning administrator's decision in the case of the appeal, what you'll see is what you get. It's not a doesn't set a precedent. It doesn't set the stage for future floodgates of canopy signs. It's a one-off, and it's applicable to this site only. And likewise for the variances. Variances are based on special circumstances for a site. We've demonstrated special circumstances here, and the burden on the property owner with no corresponding benefit to the public if those setbacks are maintained. I conclude, Mr. Chairman, my presentation. Obviously available for any questions and commentary.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Do you have any questions? Anybody have anything? No? Okay. I think we have a motion in order, if anyone's ready to do that, or any discussion amongst us.
Mr. Chairman, before moving to a motion, I would just recommend polling the audience to see if there is anyone else in favor or not in favor or neutral.
Okay.
Just to establish for the record that someone
Okay.
was or
Does
was not
anyone
here.
have any comment to? Okay. The gentleman was fell asleep on us. I think we need.
Thank you, appreciate it. For those who don't know me, Peter Glenn, City of Erlanger's city administrator. So just want to just briefly state that the City of Erlanger is in favor of PDS's recommendation on all accounts. Whereas the presentation was great and, it made some excellent points with the photos of other businesses and stuff like that, but I also think it also supports PDS's reasoning behind why the regulations are what they are. One question, especially on the setbacks, I think you were looking towards the line of sight, for the traveling public. I think that's a major concern when you're talking about the height of the signs, setback of the signs, and so on and so forth. What I didn't see here on any of the presentations was KYTC's plans to widen the section of Houston North and widen it towards this property. So whereas the sign is with a 0 setback, it is showing a certain distance. I think it was even measured off of the existing pavement now. I do believe that is changing with the widening of that road. So where the existing property line is now, the distance between the future edge of pavement and the property line is going to be much less than what it is now. And with the 0 setback, that sign will be perceived as even closer to the road.
I think there is a setback on there, and not only is there a setback, there's a construction area that exceeds the amount of setback that the right-of-way is now with the construction going on. This is, I think, going to have to be determined and worked out between the permit for the sign, the building inspector, and Kentucky Department of Transportation as they work on this road to make sure with their engineers that anything that we agree on tonight is agreeable to the construction of this to save everybody a lot of grief and money and expenditures if they would have to move it due to the fact that
Well,
KDOT's going
if the sign was in the,
Please?
if the sign was being constructed in the public right-of-way, this is not. This is on their property.
Right.
So the right-of-way or the distance between the road and the property is going to be much less than what was shown. Everything that was shown is existing conditions, and I just wanted to make a point that to future conditions, the road is going to be much wider and closer to their property.
So, yeah, okay. The road
So they
is
won't be going to
okay,
the
I got you. That it's going to wind up, it's going to be.
Yeah, so they won't go to the transportation cabinet and have any issues there because they're not encroaching into the transportation cabinet's right away.
Okay.
But with 0 setback, it'll be right much nearer the street. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Any other questions from anyone in the audience or comments? Very good. I believe that concludes our discussion. Do we have a discussion amongst ourselves? Any questions?
Which one you want to talk about first?
Well, that's the thing. We have 3 issues, basically. We have 2 signs. Do we want to do it all separate, or do we want to, the 2 signs, the setbacks on the 2 signs, do we do those individually? And then also we have the wall signs to discuss. And so what's your pleasure? Do you want to combine the, or you want to bring it up individually?
I think the recommendation was to do them individually, and
I think that-
we'll do that as well.
That will work. That will work.
Looking at, if we can just talk about it, because I like to think out loud. The number of the wall signs, I can understand you had a bunch of parcels of land now combined. So the argument of having more wall signs, I understand it. However, the signs don't fit what the section is right now. Reasonable interpretation of the code and common sense in general says these are signs to me.
Well, I appreciate that. My contention is that on the drive-through themselves, whether the customer drives from into the sign and out of the sign, it allows a sign and a logo, a directional sign on the canopy. So those would count as two of the signs, the wall signs, I think, that we're talking about, and then they're allowed the other four. But I think those are more directional, even with their logo on them, than they are actual signs for advertisement, because, you definitely have to have some kind of a direction to point everybody to make the flow work. And whether the customer drives into the canopy and out of the canopy, the car still travels in and out of the canopy, because whether the customer's driving or an employee of Enterprise. So I believe myself that those signs are, well, not signs, but directional things on the canopy that, should be allowed. Anyone else?
I don't disagree that they are directional, but they also contain more than directional information and logos. They're also exceed the maximum size of signs that are permitted. They're just bigger and more. So it's saying that the whole section across the board is just incorrect.
Yeah, I agree that it is more, because they do have a logo on that. I don't see where it's that bad a thing. I'm just now, I'm looking at
Well, I'm not saying it's a bad thing either, but to the argument that was proposed that it does not say that you can't borrow signs from the car wash building, it also doesn't say that you can either. But what it does say very clearly, one wall sign per street building frontage.
Yeah. Well, now that's back to the other thing, that there's three businesses under one name, but there's three different operations going on here. So wouldn't each of those three be entitled to have wall signs? So wouldn't that increase the number of wall signs that would be entitled in the building itself, with having three different entities? That, you've got the sales, the truck rental, and the auto rental.
Curious everybody else's thoughts.
Yeah, anybody else? Yeah. Sure.
Well, I think I have some concerns as what a sign is versus a logo. So it's non-illuminated. You're asking me what I'm thinking. This is what I'm thinking.
Okay.
Non-illuminated logos do not constitute a sign by their explanation to me, the way I hear it, right? So some of these signs, quote unquote, that are getting lumped in, to me, are just logos for Enterprise. I mean, they're a national business that are they're trying to promote said business, and they have a trademark logo. I don't see that as a sign. The signs do not bother me nearly as much as the setback.
Yeah.
Two different
Well,
issues, but
let's break this out into segments, and we've discussed the sign, the four wall signs. Anything else discussion on?
Well, to your point, it's a single tenant building, and they have three businesses running out of it. Let's say they had 5 businesses running out of it. Does that mean they get more signs just because they have more businesses running out of a single tenant location?
They would be individuals. You'd have to be able to identify each business that's in that building. So yes, you would have more signs that would, however it was done. I mean, that's So do we have a motion for the wall signs?
first time.
They didn't give us what to go off on here.
Huh?
How do you want to word this?
I'll tell you what, if it's in favorable, here's what we have to use in
The usual.
our usual, yeah. Yeah, so here.
I'll make a motion to approve the, what was it, 6 wall signs? Granting that let's see, on the condition that granting of the requested variances will not adversely affect the public health, safety, or welfare, will not alter the essential character of the general vicinity, will not cause a hazard or nuisance to the public, and will not allow an unreasonable circumvention of the requirements of the zoning regulation.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Mr. Chairman, as a point of order, if I might, I hate to play lawyer, but that's what I'm paid for. The motion, I think, is probably best stated as a granting of the appeal and an overruling of the zoning administrator with respect to the wall signs. I heard the motion also include some of the variance standards about the unreasonableness and so forth. So you're sort of mixing apples and oranges. I hate to interrupt.
Okay.
Well, I'm not an attorney, so
Yeah.
where's Erlanger's attorney on this?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I'm not
we don't have
This
a,
is deeper than we've ever been on anything in my time here.
No, I appreciate that. That's why I'm trying to help.
we do not have a lot of times we have a guideline, and we do not have that, so we're winging this, we'll remove the variance, and it's a granting of the,
Of the appeal?
yeah.
Yeah, that's, I think would be appropriate.
Then I'll restate it.
Okay. Granting of the request to,
The requested appeal.
yeah.
Let's try this again. I make a motion to grant the requested appeal that it will not adversely affect the public health, safety, or welfare, will not alter the essential character of the general vicinity, will not cause a hazard or nuisance to the public, and will not allow an unreasonable circumvention of the requirements of the zoning regulations.
Very good.
We have another hand up.
Before the vote, the city would like a continuance, ask for a continuance.
I'm sorry, what's that?
I said before you vote, the city would request a continuance, so our attorney can be here.
Fair enough?
Who's requesting it?
Yeah. Who's requesting that?
Who's requesting it?
The city of Erlanger.
Huh?
The city is.
I think Pete, on behalf of the city, is requesting.
On behalf of the city requesting it?
The meeting started at 7.
With the motion on the table,
I don't know.
can we? I think a motion's,
Pete, please?
What is the question?
there's a motion on the floor.
There's a motion on the floor. We're waiting on a second, and it's not, this is very unusual to stop this in the middle of things that we're getting ready to vote on. I just don't feel confident and comfortable in doing that.
So the motion's on the floor.
Do we have a
Do
second?
we have a second?
I will second the motion. We need a roll call vote, or whoever's recording. Go ahead, Jeremy, your vote is?
I vote my vote is yes.
And Steve Conley, my vote is yes.
Yeah, my vote is yes, too.
My vote is no.
Okay, the motion has carried. Okay.
So do we allow the other two to continuance on the two sign setbacks?
Now, would you like a continuance without the motion on the floor on the
On the setback.
setbacks of the two signs? No? Very good. Okay. The setbacks of the two signs, do we want to do those one at a time? It's two areas. One is let's do those one, well, how do you guys want to do it? Does it matter? Two different signs, but two different locations.
I can go together.
I have the same opinion on both, yeah.
Huh?
I have the same opinion on both, and we could do them together.
Do them together? Okay. So we have, the request is a 5-foot setback. It's been stated that 5 foot is a pretty minimal amount of distance. It is considerably back from the right-of-way. However, we do have new lanes coming in, which is going to put the Donaldson Avenue, that's going to put that in a little closer.
The request is a 0-foot setback.
So 0, right.
Correct.
Right, so, yeah, a 0 setback instead of the 5 foot. So that with the new lanes coming into Donaldson, that could encroach on that a little bit further. We have no idea where that's going to, how much of the right-of-way they're going to use up at this point. So, anyway, anybody else got any comments on that?
I think all the surrounding properties adhere to 5-foot setback, and if you give them 5 feet, it will stick out, and I think it will obstruct views, foot traffic, auto traffic, sight lines in general. I'm not a fan of it.
You're not a fan of the,
Granting this request, yes, to 0 feet.
okay. Anyone else, comments? Okay. Do we have a motion in order?
I'll give it a shot.
You can do better than I can.
Yep. So in regards to BOA 2306-0006, the request, a variance request to reduce the setback of a detached principal sign from 5 feet to 0 feet at a corner located of Donaldson Highway and Houston Road, and then a second request of the same for another sign at the corner of Rodeo Drive and Houston Road. I grant that we do not approve the request due to reasons as stated by staff, that the request variance does not arise from special circumstances which do not generally apply to other properties in the area, and the surrounding area is zoned HC, and there are no topography or other circumstances that apply to this land that do not apply to land in the general vicinity. Also, that the strict application of the provisions of the regulation will not deprive the applicant of the reasonable use of land or create an unnecessary hardship. The applicant can erect a sign that meets the setback requirements, and this application is not the result of actions taken by the applicant, but the applicant identified the need for the variance during the normal permitting process.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second for that motion?
I'll second.
Okay. We'll have a vote on that. Jeremy?
Yes.
Mine's Steve Conley. I say yes.
John McVeigh, I say yes.
Bob Whalen, yes.
Okay, unanimously declined. Okay. I don't think we have any other board or staff items for this evening. So therefore, I would like a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.